B2B.
B2B.
Paid media, B2B, lead generation. That's what we're going to be talking about.
Yep.
I think it's a bit of the unloved brother of B2C sometimes in terms of what gets discussed on podcasts and things like this.
Agree with that.
Well, actually, it's genuinely really interesting.
Yep.
And the approach is really interesting. The mindset's really interesting. It's definitely quite different to B2C. So it should be a good chat.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So I guess first off, it's that point really, isn't it? Like, what do you think are the biggest differences between running PPC or paid media in general for a B2C campaign versus B2B? Like, what are the biggest differences?
I think the main difference is obviously you've got like B2B, which is probably more of like a logical approach to marketing versus B2C, where it might be more emotional. I think it goes without saying that it's generally a longer marketing process than B2C. So I think it's really important that you need to be able to get your brand out there, build up trust early and provide value up front, which you don't necessarily always need to do with B2C.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And it's the buying journey is often significantly longer. And like the consideration behind it. Yeah. The research phase, even once you've got a potential customer's got in touch and completed a contact form. Yeah. Sometimes you've still got up to a year.
Oh yeah, it can be
for that to turn into business, right?
Yeah, it can be a huge cycle. Yeah.
So being able to provide value up front, it's definitely that longer term play, isn't it?
Definitely, 100%.
I also think, and it's not that this sounds contradictory in a way almost, but when you're running B2C, I think things are just a bit more black and white. Yeah. Particularly e-commerce, when you spend the money on the ads and the conversion data's right there. Yeah. Whereas with B2B, it's like we said, it could be up to a year before that inquiry converts. Yeah. So you really have to, not that you don't with B2C, but you really have to understand the customer, the buying cycle, the motivations behind buying, different objections, what the sales process looks like. Yeah. All of that stuff has to be taken into real consideration. Yeah. When you're running B2B.
Yeah, it's so important. And I'm sure we'll touch on this like throughout the podcast around, of course, if you're doing lead generation for B2B, you're going to be measured on leads, but also you really need to be looking at quite regularly lead quality and how you measure it, how you can improve it, all those kind of things that it's not just, okay, we got this number of leads in, it's understanding the whole process like you mentioned.
Yeah, we definitely have to talk about measurement because you're absolutely right. Looking at cost per lead or cost per contact form is so misleading. Yeah. Because you could be generating a load of junk leads. Yeah. All you're doing is wasting the sales team's time. Yeah, exactly. Which is not great. But on the surface, you're like, hey, we've increased your, or decreased your cost per lead by X. Aren't we great? Yeah. But actually, it could be different. So, we have to talk about measurement. Yeah. But I think that mindset thing is really different. Like, is a really big difference in terms of even just writing ads. And quite often, our experience of B2B anyway, is with quite large organizations who provide very high value services but are quite niche. Yeah. So we have to constantly understand different sectors, different customer bases, different customer needs. Yeah. So there's an element of, I think, not a lot more research, but certainly different research that's needed.
Agreed. Yeah. I think again, it's something that we'll touch on, but every organization is different as well. So they'll have different ways of measuring quality of leads. So like marketing qualified leads and scoring systems and all these kind of things, as coupled with the fact that some industries can be quite complex to understand. Like we're not experts in that industry. We are search marketers, but it's like chicken and egg really. In order to be a good search marketer for that particular client,
you have to understand that industry.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is where great client relationships come in. Yeah. Because you have to have a relationship where, yes, we'll do the research, we'll do our homework, and we'll do our absolute best to get as much knowledge as we can. Yeah. But ultimately, the client leans on us for our expertise and we lean on the client for their expertise, and we both then become greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a collaborative effort.
Absolutely.
100%.
Before we get on to measurement, let's talk a little bit about planning and approach.
Yep.
I think we can't talk about that until we talk about platforms.
Yeah.
So obviously the platform selection is usually slightly different.
Yep.
Obviously your PPC.
Yeah.
We do a lot on LinkedIn ads.
Yes.
It's kind of the obvious choice. Facebook ads, I think, it can work, but it's really patchy.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask, well, can't we use Facebook for B2B? Yeah, of course, that you absolutely can. But as with anything, like you've said, every business is different, every audience is different, every customer is different. So you just have to test it, don't you? But 9 times out of 10, more success comes from Google and LinkedIn, right?
Yes, yeah. For B2B, they're definitely like the bread and butter platforms. Google definitely, and obviously the nature of LinkedIn is perfect for B2B marketing. Yeah. But I imagine we're going to be leaning more on the PPC side for this chat.
Yeah, of course, of course. So on the PPC side, any particular challenges with B2B that you see when you're running search ads?
I think the biggest challenge is actually just being able to understand the market that you're advertising in, the internal processes. So with a lot of like big corporations that we work with, there's a lot of hurdles to jump through. So what we can and can't do, regulations within the industry, and all of this does take time. And there's a lot of research that goes into it, before we kick off with a new client, for example. But it can take 3 to 6 months of working in the account to sort of like fully understand what you're doing. Yeah. Obviously, the better prepared you can be in terms of like pre-campaign research, but there's always going to be new things that you learn, internal processes that you learn that, like I said, can take 3 to 6 months.
Definitely.
But the quicker you can get up to speed, the more comfortable you'll feel working in that account.
Absolutely, 100%. I think there's a big time investment needed to do it properly.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. The flip side to that is media spend.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest tangible, like right in front of you data differences is volume.
Yeah.
And some B2B clients or some B2B sectors, there's just not a lot of volume there.
Yeah.
Which means you're not going to spend a massive amount of money on media.
Yeah.
Unless you want to go really broad, do loads of awareness and all that type of stuff. Of course, you can spend whatever you fancy, but 9 times out of 10, the budgets are smaller because the volume's smaller.
Yeah.
But this is where the traditional charging model of percentage of spend it does not apply to B2B in my opinion. And like we don't use it anyway because I just don't agree with it. But when you've got a very niche, high value service, the volume's going to be quite low. But the time investment needed to really understand it and really do a great job is massive.
Yeah.
So sometimes the fee is bigger than the media spend.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. That's just how it needs to be. If you want, an agency that are going to really, work hard to understand the industry that you're working in and be able to effectively work on your campaign, sometimes that is needed.
Yeah, and it's all about getting the best quality leads for the least amount of money.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yeah.
So actually the less you spend to get the results you need, the better.
Yeah.
Because the more concentrated the effort is. And I think to me that's another big difference between B2C, PPC, it's really confusing, and B2B. It's just volume, spend versus fees, that type of stuff is just so different.
Yeah. You did make a very good point though, in terms of like the media spend might be a lot lower, but generally the deal sizes from the leads that are generated are a lot bigger. Yes. So, the return on investment in theory is a lot higher for B2B than what we see for B2C.
That's a great point. And that goes back to why are you doing it in the first place? Actually, you're hiring someone like us to be a partner to generate the best return possible.
Yeah.
Or to generate new business or to hit a business goal or to hit a revenue goal or whatever it is. We just happen to use PPC as our method to do that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's about us getting the most business possible, isn't it?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, but always, I mean, in terms of the planning, you've mentioned a lot about research. Like, is there any other points that you would make about doing an effective job of planning PPC for B2B?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to that collaborative approach like we discussed. So there's a lot of elements of B2B and B2C that from a research point of view are very similar. So we're talking about sort of like keyword research, campaign plans, all that kind of stuff. But what we find really helpful, especially for the B2B clients, is to have, before we even kick off any research or build campaigns out, to have a lot of sessions with your internal teams to run us through target personas, pain points, all these kind of things, any competitor information that you can give us so we can go away and research what they're doing in terms of ads. All of these things really help get us up to speed and, you know, on the same page to do a good job for the campaigns.
Definitely. I think back to one of what I would probably describe as one of the best client onboardings I've seen, and it was B2B.
Yeah.
And the client came with so much information, like history of the business, why the business started, you know, here's what the founders are like. Here's their ambitions, and not just the stuff that you would be able to find in public, but like genuine, like here's where we're headed as a business, here's what we're doing, you know, loads and loads of information, and it just puts us in the best stead.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you want that from a B2C campaign as well. So it's not that we wouldn't want that or do that for B2C, but for B2B, when you've got such low volume, you've got to make every click count, and you've got to, you know, we're talking about 6 to 12 month lead times.
Yeah.
You can't get anywhere without that information.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I will say as well, from my experience of B2B, you can obviously go on the websites, but I find that a lot of the websites are written...
As in the client's websites?
Client's websites, written for their target market, who probably understand the thing that they are selling or the service they're providing, whereas the average person. So I find it really useful to almost explain that to the client and say, look, we're not experts. Please explain everything in layman's terms as much as you can to us, so that we get this real, you know, sense and idea of exactly who you are and what you do.
Absolutely, 100%. Measurement.
Yes.
So we talked a bit earlier about how cost per lead can be quite misleading because you could be getting 100 junk leads a day, but your KPI could look amazing. Yeah. And it just doesn't reflect reality. Talk me through your preferred method or your way of thinking when it comes to measurement. Yeah.
So we haven't actually touched on this yet, but one of the main differences between B2C and B2B is we find that a content-led approach works much better for B2B and not necessarily something you would do for B2C. Yeah. And it goes back to that kind of like providing value up front, where if you produce like gated assets, ebooks, journals, webinars, all these kind of things, gated content, to almost act as like lead magnets to get the leads in. We found, because it's such a longer approach, like we discussed at the beginning, that content and gated content works really well. Yep. So in terms of like measuring lead quality, so a lot of B2B organizations that we work with, when we're working on a content-based approach, will have lead scoring systems. So certain pieces of content will be closer to becoming a marketing qualified lead than others, for example. Yep. So that's the first thing that we can measure, is the number of marketing qualified leads, not just the number of leads coming in. Yep. What we tend to do for a couple of our clients as well is we'll regularly review lead quality. So we may sort of set like, there may be certain, you know, barriers that classify it as like a junk lead, for example. One of those might be the job title that the lead inputs their information and okay, this isn't the kind of person that we want to reach. So that's something that we do regularly as well. We can obviously, if systems and processes are set up in the back end, measure leads back to like pipeline revenue and how much kind of actual business the leads brought in. Yeah, definitely. So you go, obviously you got clicks to the landing page, leads, it's cost per lead. So cost per click, cost per lead, cost per marketing qualified lead. Yeah.
and then through into pipeline value and lead scoring, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And amongst all of that, you can tell quite a good story, can't you?
You can, exactly, yeah. So we, obviously you're always going to get some junk leads. We think a good figure to aim for is kind of like if you've got 30% junk leads, 70% leads that kind of progress on to the next stage, that's the kind of figures that we're aiming for, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously if you can improve that through certain things that we'll talk about in a bit, great. You're going to have an overall positive effect on your business.
Yeah, absolutely. The important bit with that is having visibility on it as well.
Yeah.
And first off, having a system in place that can do all of that.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to physically track campaign data through the form into your CRM, so that when so-and-so from so-and-so gets in touch.
That famous company.
Yeah, gets in touch, and then 12 months later turns into business. You need to be able to track all those stages back to, he came through that LinkedIn ad and signed up to that webinar, and then 12 months later turned into our biggest deal. You kind of want to know that that's come from...
Absolutely.
So that's important.
I think there's no point starting any kind of advertising unless you've got all of those systems and conversion tracking in place, because you're advertising blind. Like, you can make an educated guess on, your best performing content and things like that, but you won't be able to track that user all the way through.
Happens.
So
yeah, definitely. So I think that is really important. It's not often that hard either.
No.
To do it.
No.
It's easier than it sounds, but it's so important.
Yeah.
In fact, we're going to hopefully just get on to talk about a couple of examples now. And one really clear example in my mind about B2B success was, working with a client. We were working with a client a while ago, and part of the task was making sure that we could see the Salesforce data and how that related to PPC activity. And actually having that in place, we found that historically a lot of the leads that they were getting through, they were just getting through a lot. Like the unqualified leads, the percentage was massive.
Yeah.
But they were all coming through really obvious terms.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, we're not doing great.
Yeah.
And it turned out that these really niche, low volume terms that you probably would never have thought about were all the ones delivering the value.
Yeah.
And also the high quality leads came during the week, the low quality ones came at the weekend. All of that information that means you can refine towards the business outcome.
Yeah.
Just without that information, everyone thought they were doing great.
Yeah.
Get that information in, actually we need to change the course here quite significantly. So and we did, and it worked.
Yeah, so important to be able to build up accurate data, like you said, and always must remember, this goes for any marketing campaign, that the goal is not leads, the goal is business growth. Mm-hmm. And obviously lead generation is just a way to facilitate that.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any favourite wins from a B2B perspective?
I have, yeah. So we were just talking about kind of like quality of leads. So one thing I do really like looking at and getting into the data is percentage of kind of quality leads, marketing qualified leads versus junk leads as such.
Yeah.
So with this one client, it's a content-led approach.
Yeah.
We're tied to kind of like in-platform cost per lead metrics.
Yep.
But also cost per marketing qualified lead.
Yep.
We have recently been testing an approach which looks at maximizing conversion value.
Yep.
So a lot of people associate that bid strategy with e-commerce. We want you to find clients that are going to spend the most amount of money, but it's actually working really, really well for B2B lead generation.
Yep.
And essentially what you need to do in your account is let Google know that a marketing qualified lead is worth significantly more than just, say, a cost per download of an asset.
Yep.
And what we found is that optimizing the campaigns for marketing qualified leads and focusing on conversion value, our cost per lead has gone up, but our cost per marketing qualified lead, basically the quality of leads coming in, has reduced significantly. like 50%. So
wow,
if we were just looking at in-platform metrics, they may sort of say, and they don't, by the way, because they understand that marketing qualified leads are what's important. Our actual cost per lead has gone up 50%. However, our marketing qualified leads gone down 50%. So
wow,
it's a strategy that's working really, really well. And I think as Google move more and more towards like automation and everything like that, if you're not doing so already, I definitely recommend. And to be clear, you do need to have a system in place where you feed this data back into Google Ads, either through analytics or your CRM. Definitely worth testing, maximize conversion value, and essentially letting Google know that marketing qualified leads are worth a lot more to your business than just your average lead.
That's really smart. I love that example. I really love that. It also, do you know what? That also really highlights the need for a solid understanding of what automated bidding is and how it works.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times the mistakes in PPC are, this bidding strategy is the next best thing or the next biggest thing. Let's use that because everyone says it's great. And it's like, well, yeah, it might be great.
Yeah.
But you have to understand how to apply it and use it within your own context.
Yeah.
So I think that is just such a brilliant example of that exact thing.
Yeah.
Like automation doesn't necessarily mean taking your hands off.
Yeah.
You're just working it in a different way, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. So one thing to consider with that strategy though is that volume of leads can be quite important. Obviously,
so to get that working.
Yeah, to get it working. So as with any automated bidding strategy, the more data you've got flowing through it, the better it's going to work. So might not, be too tailored towards like really low volume industries, but for this particular client, there is a lot of volume. Media spend is quite chunky. So it's working really well.
No, definitely. But I do think that we touched on it a few times, haven't we? And those are great examples. But being able to see the next bit is so important.
Yeah.
And just going beyond lead quality.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if the system's not there, just being able to see what's coming through can often give you a sense, can't it? Like, if you want to get, say if you're getting like, 10 leads a week, just go and look at what companies they're coming from.
Yeah.
And that'll give you a sense. Then look at the job titles.
Yeah.
But you've got to be really careful, haven't you? Because companies and brands might be misleading. Because if you get a lead from Tesco's.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got marketing director guy collecting the trolleys.
Yeah, of course.
I used to be the guy collecting. Have I told you that story?
No. I worked in Budgeons once. That was a good.
Really?
Job.
Yeah. I was employed by Waitrose.
But high end.
I think I was 15. I got demoted from the checkout to the trolleys.
Oh no! What did you do?
In the middle of winter. I was just really bad I was slow
on the graveyard shift.
So like if LinkedIn ads or this type of stuff would have existed at that time, which it would have done in an early form.
Yeah.
Or PPC. Probably ask Jeeves. You wouldn't have wanted me filling out your form.
No, definitely. I think that's where like obviously job title and company and you look at them both together to.
But you can see, can't you? And you can get a flavour for it. And if you're going, right, well actually, do you know what? We're getting the right job titles and the right types of companies, even if you haven't got a sophisticated lead scoring system in or any of that stuff yet.
Yeah.
You'll at least get a flavour for it, won't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to have that feedback loop. So from an agency and in-house marketing team collaboration point of view.
Yes.
Like I said earlier, we regularly review the quality of leads. So looking at things like the percentage of junk leads versus quality leads.
Yep.
Now it's subjective what classifies as a junk lead and will be different for every business. But also we get feedback from the sales teams.
Yes.
As to, why certain leads didn't progress.
Yeah.
Or things like that. And then you can actually review all the data and see, okay, overall we're getting 30% junk leads, but is there any particular campaigns or areas where a lot of these are coming through? Yep. We did have this instance. It was like one particular campaign that was producing the majority of junk leads.
Yeah.
And then you take a step back and look at the keyword targeting, and it was probably a little bit too broad.
Okay, yeah.
And just refining down, being a little bit more specific with our keywords, reduce down that percentage of junk leads quite nicely.
Can we also talk about, it's hard to talk about specific examples without being specific, but we can't really be that specific, unfortunately, because that would be too specific. But that example, there was an example last year, I think, of a client where the leads that were generated through a particular campaign on paper looked great, but the sales team were leaving them in favour of phone calls.
Yes.
Remember that one?
Yes.
So the leads that are being generated through social weren't progressing through the system because they may have been a little bit early, or, you know, a phone call direct to the sales guy is going to be quicker.
Yeah. So was this the problem where they were ignoring web inquiries, but they were picking up the phone?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one. So, but my point here is that this is where we've been talking a lot about time investment to do things properly. And on the surface, you go, oh man, we've generated all these leads. Oh, none of them are converted, or only a tiny fraction are converted or progressed through the system.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it didn't work. So, no, if you've got a decent relationship and you're really involved, actually the problem there was they weren't being progressed because...
Yeah, that was on the sales team, yeah.
Yeah, they were being, I guess quite understandably, if you're going to get a quicker conversion, there's that element to it, but doesn't mean they're bad.
No, exactly.
They're all bad leads. So really being under the skin of everything and being able to understand the nuance is where the skill is at, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Any parting thoughts, Chris? Like we've been talking for half an hour. I can't believe it, because that went really quickly. But any parting thoughts on B2B? Because I think we'll have to come back to it at some point as well.
Yeah, I think, like I said, what we find generally works better on B2B is a content-led approach. I think a lot of B2B businesses don't always see the value in producing content. They almost want to just go straight for the jugular and send them through to like a lead form, get their details straight away. But I think, like we touched on at the beginning of the podcast, that sort of providing value up front. But not also that, being able to demonstrate your expertise. So if you put our predictions for 2023 ebook together, or you've got a panel of experts on a webinar, that kind of thing, it kind of kills two birds with one stone. You're demonstrating your expertise, you're also providing value, and you're getting their details through a lead magnet. So, even if you think that it might be too much work to produce all this content, generally that's what we've seen work a lot better for
definitely works. Yeah, and
PPC marketing.
Almost every time a client's or someone said, let's just put up an ad and try and go straight for the sale. It's never worked. It has to be a longer term, particularly if it's a bigger deal value. You're going after bigger companies. And it's a longer cycle. It just doesn't work trying to go straight in for the kill, does it?
It doesn't. Well, you can test it. Like we always still
absolutely 100%
test it, because it could be sort of like industry specific. Test sending your traffic direct to a landing page to get their information. Test sending to different forms of content. So it could be an ebook 1 week or a couple of weeks versus a webinar, that kind of thing. See what type of content resonates best with your audience. And hone in on what works.
Definitely. Cool. Yeah. All right, Chris, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Good chat. Love B2B.
To be, or brackets, not to be. No, but brilliant. And I think there's so much more within that we can come back and talk about in the future. And genuinely hope that if anyone's listened to this who's looking at exploring paid media for B2B, that it's been useful. If anyone's new to the podcast, please do come and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, please do come and subscribe. Join us for future episodes where we talk about the ins and outs of running paid media and driving improved conversions and revenue for your business. See you next time.